If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything that you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on any listening platform like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many, many more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Wartime Leadership Podcast, where we explore what spiritual resiliency looks like from different perspectives. We often focus on the physical, emotional, and social areas of resiliency, but often neglect the spiritual pillar. This looks different for everyone. We will be exploring what spiritual resiliency looks like in the lives of our guests, who are people from all different walks of life. Tonight's episode is sponsored by Success Draft, where we help you transform your dreams into drafted plans. Head over to successdraft.com to get started on your future today. This episode's guest is Brian Bergford. He is an author, athlete, podcaster, entrepreneur, and specializes in personal performance optimization and coaches and develops customized performance systems for athletes, athletic professionals, and business owners. And on top of it all, he has won multiple national championships in swimming. Brian, what can't you do?
Well, it's amazing that I think those biographies are so hilarious because they're so curated. We make the things that we actually can do seem like everything, It's like I just call my mom and I'm like, say every great thing you can think of about me. But every day I am delightfully petrified by what I cannot do. So it actually, it helps keep me really humble.
Well, I mean, it sounds like there's actually stuff that there's nothing you can't do. I mean, you've overcome a lot to get to the point that you are. But how about if we start off with 5 simple questions as a warm-up?
Let's do it, dude. Let's see how this goes. Hit me.
All right. What is one thing that you find repulsive?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think of how to phrase the answer. Something that I find repulsive is the twisting of the truth.
Ooh, nice.
So, yeah, that's not necessarily something people do consciously all the time. I think some people are unwittingly in positions where they are twisting the truth, and they some of them know they're doing it, some of them don't, but that's the bottom line answer.
I really like it because I've had every answer to that question, right? Like I've had passing gas, I've had bad breath, I've had liars, but that's a very good way of putting that. So good job on that. What is one thing that is in your online shopping cart that you have not bought yet?
In my online shop, so this is an interesting tidbit. I don't have anything in my online shopping cart that I haven't bought because I like keeping that queue like clean and clear. So if I'm not buying it, I just empty the whole darn thing.
Wow. So you don't even let it sit there.
I don't let it sit there. I like, if I'm going to buy something, I buy it. So I'm definitely not one of those people that just kind of goes out, even in physical stores, and like just browses like la, 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 la. I know when I'm freaking going in for, right? It's kind of like the sniper approach to shopping. And so I go in, I spear it, I kill it, I get out. And I kind of do the same thing with online shopping.
What about your spouse?
She has, I would say she has more things in the online cart that haven't been purchased. It would probably be something she loves to paint and color and stuff like that. Has a really creative side. She's actually a very analytical, brilliant person, but very much has the creative aspect to her that she keeps up. So I would guess it's something around that.
Wow, that's really interesting. My brother is the artist of our family, so I know that feeling with that. What is one thing that you absolutely love about your career?
Ooh, kind of I would say the ever shifting nature of it, because it involves people, right? And the evolution of people, human beings, their consciousness, right? Just where they're at psychologically, emotionally speaking. And so it's an interesting, not only moving target, but it's kind of beautiful to behold the shifts and changes, the ins and outs, just all the different phases that people go through. And so it's never boring, that's for sure.
Well, that is a interesting perspective on it for sure. But now let's look at the flip side. What is one thing that you would leave your current career for?
That I would leave it for?
Mm-hmm.
Something else that I knew I was being called to. Because that's the only reason that I really see fit to have the career in the first place. So if I was called to something else, I guess it wouldn't necessarily be a specific thing that would be enticing to me. It would be more the call.
We talk about that a lot, about the differences between a career or a job or, what we feel called to is definitely once you find that passion, you grab onto it and you go.
And it's interesting too, because there's a calling that we can, from my experience, that people get. They can be very internally driven, right? Like we feel called to, like, hey, I'd really like to do this thing, but that's different than a calling. And I think being able to differentiate the two of those and understand like which voice is kind of speaking to you is really, really, really important, because we all have things that we could feel called to because they would be fun. It would be a great next step. It would be something a little different than what we're doing. We'd be able to maybe move to a different part of the country, whatever. And nothing wrong with any of that. It's just different than being called to something that is, it's not just coming from kind of like our personal desires or interests or proclivities or whatever the case might be. So I think that learning to listen to which voice it is, and unfortunately the real calling is usually a much more subtle. It's not like the screaming voice that gets all the attention. It's normally like the quiet voice that we only hear either when we hit rock bottom and we finally listen, or we're just in a place where we actually quiet our minds, we take some time off, we really step back and allow things to kind of come up without needlessly putting things in front of our face in terms of like screens and phones and everything else, or we've got like constant background noise. We're just present and we're there, and that's when that voice can come up.
Absolutely. Now your final question. I said these were the easy ones, right?
Oh gosh.
So the final easy one. I have 2 tickets and I'm going to hand them to you. One is for a place that you've already been, and one is for a place that you have never been but want to go. Where are those 2 tickets to?
The first ticket is to Cabo. I enjoy Cabo. I love Cabo. And the second place would be to Italy. That's where I'm at right now. It's just I've kind of got like the Italy bug lately, and it's not something where I feel like I have to go or whatever. I mean, I would die a happy man if I didn't go, but it just, I don't know, it's been popping up a lot lately, and it just seems like it would be delicious, like eating some wonderful food overlooking a beautiful ocean with some, like a little city with lots of nice little buildings and homes on the side of the hill, lit up at night. I mean, how fun is that?
Any city in particular?
I don't know, dude. Just like the ones I see in the pictures that are great. It's funny how much, in some respects in my life, I'm a detail person, and in a lot of other regards, I don't really care much about details. I'm kind of about the core essence of a thing, and that's what really interests me.
Wow, that is really cool. That is a good perspective to have on it. And I like the self-awareness of, in some areas I'm detail, in some areas I don't want to be detail.
Yeah, yeah, I can be notorious for not keeping track of details that other people might think are like, oh my gosh, like you don't remember, like whatever, somebody's name. It's like I remember the spirit of the person. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what I'm going for. So I have to work really hard because, like knowing people's names is it's just uncouth not to not to pay any attention. So I kind of have to watch that. But I'm really, really, really always looking for like what's the essence, what's beneath it all, what's the bigger picture. Sort of like in movies, right? There's the movie and then there's everything that's playing out kind of on the surface, and then there's all the deeper meaning stuff, which is far more compelling to me than the characters' names. Like I remember I had watched. Like however many seasons there are of like Game of Thrones, and I have no idea who the characters' names are like at the end. Like I just never, it didn't matter to me because I'm looking for like what is this person about, not what are they called.
Yeah, or when somebody screws up your last name as they're introducing you on their podcast, Brian Bergford. See, I finally remembered.
Hey man, and it's funny because you had asked me before we hopped on, how do you say it? And I really appreciate it, brother, because you were like, I could see the effort that was going into it, and you're like, I want to get this right, and it's all good, dude. Like, I really. It's funny because I don't care if you mispronounce my name, so you can call me whatever. It's all good.
Well, I really do appreciate it. So, hey, Brian, why don't you walk us through your background, like where you came from, what your family history, or wherever you want to take the conversation. Let's go on that journey.
That's a fun question because that gives me a lot of latitude, doesn't it? Um, yeah, I mean, I grew up. So right now I live in just north of Denver, Colorado. I'm about 15 minutes down the road, 20 maybe, depending on how fast or slow you drive, from the town that I grew up in. And yeah, man, I just like, as a kid, I remember for whatever reason it's coming up, kind of like fishing at this lake that was down the street from our house. And I would always go kind of the backside of the lake. You're not supposed to swim or wade in the lake, but I always would. I'd take my waders out and I'd like fly fish really early in the mornings, like all summer long, and just loved, I think, the peace and the solitude of that, and just being in a quiet space, because I think a lot of my kind of childhood stuff could be very cacophonous, just in terms of some of the like interesting, everybody has their stuff, right? And I happen to have a lot of like interesting emotional stuff that popped up in childhood, and it did lead me to being very fascinated by the human mind, psychology, what really makes people tick, and then ultimately eventually like what makes people perform at really high levels. But initially it was just kind of birthed out of this sort of pain and lack of understanding, but wanting to understand what the heck was going on and not really having a great frame of reference. So it did create a drive in me to learn more, to understand how people think and again process information, how they develop emotional and thought patterns, how that factors into the way that they see the world and every decision that they make. And then obviously all of that, when you bring that into people coming together in relationships, you have this incredible and complex dynamic behind everything that is said and done. So I find that stuff endlessly fascinating. I really loved always athletics and sports, even though I really was not at all an athlete younger. Like I did nothing in high school and college. I was in like show choirs and theater in high school and stuff. In college, I was doing strength training. I worked a little bit with the football team in particular at CU Boulder. And I really found that I loved working with athletes. I always kind of say they had batteries included. And when I was doing training for the general public, that wasn't necessarily something that I found to be the case, right? Like they wanted all these awesome things, but they didn't freaking show up. And then they're like, ugh, and I freaking hate whining, and it's annoying as crap. And like, if I have to motivate somebody, like I'm the wrong person for them. It's like, you got to show up and like bring your own stuff, because I like what I do now with either, sports psychology or just like personal performance stuff, whether it's for executives, business owners, whatever. I'm really looking at helping people who bust their can, take things to the next level, and have a tremendous amount of fulfillment and depth along the way. I think we're getting into a place where it's not just about performance so much anymore, but people are starting to talk more and open up to the spiritual side of things. And I think a lot of it is because of some of the recent, the developments over the last couple of years with COVID and everything else. But it's been an interesting shift, and I think that it's one of the big blessings, despite the cluster that it has been on so many levels. More of an awareness of depth and bringing spirituality and psychology and emotions and performance, and looking at all of that and not just one of those pillars. So that's a little bit about my background, what gets me excited, and what I love about what I do day to day.
Yeah, and you mentioned it about the spiritual pillar, and of course I talk about in the beginning about the multiple pillar approach. And one thing I really liked from what I was looking on your website and listening to you through the different lessons that you have on the app is you talk about all the pillars working together in unison. And I really like that concept, because that's something that we talk about in the military side a lot, is that you have to be structured, and that structure has to be constant throughout. And if it's not, if one starts to get cracked, if one starts to get damaged, the whole thing will start to topple over.
Yeah. There's just like as we look at in physical training and everything, you have to keep things in balance, and you have to consider a lot. And that's just when we're talking about the physical, right? Like this, 3 days from now. Yeah, 3 days from now, I'm swimming the state championships here in Colorado. And there's so much that goes into making sure that you're strong, that you've got endurance, that you've got these different capacities, but also that you're taking care of your body, recovery, injury prevention. And that's just on the physical side. So as beings that are multifaceted, it's always amazing to me that some people will neglect one pillar and they become really strong in the others, and there's nothing wrong with that, because sometimes people specialize in something so well that they really help other people that aren't as strong in that. So everything has its place and it's all important. But that being said, if you're somebody who's out there and kicking butt and taking names, right, but you're leaving whole sides of yourself out, it's kind of weird. It would be like the difference between a movie that's in 3D or like some type of holographic thing, right? Like high definition versus one of the TVs that I had in my house as a kid, which was the black and white with the rabbit ears on top, and it was like this tiny little screen.
And the remote control was you going up to the TV and turning the knob. Oh yeah,
and hoping the knob like didn't break off while you were turning it, like it did the other day. So it's just the more that we want to maximize who we really are and our full potential, the more we have to become responsible for looking at things that maybe aren't fun to look at or to deal with. It's funny, I was on a podcast I don't know, like a month ago or something. And they asked me, and it was not a podcast like this where I feel like there's a receptive crowd just by virtue of what the podcast is and your audience and everything. And I was asked something about like, well, what do you think is the biggest thing that you could actually accomplish, or that you'd be interested in accomplishing? And I was like, fully awakening from a spiritual standpoint. And then the host came back and was like, kind of laughing and like, that's such a safe answer. And I understood why she was saying it. And it could be a safe answer, but the way I meant it was, no, it's actually like the most dangerous answer on the planet, because if you get really seriously into and you become very dedicated to and committed to spiritual work, and you have that like pointed attention, that focused attention on it, it will take you on a roller coaster ride like nothing else, and it'll drag you through the weeds. So like there's a difference between using spirituality as an experience to not do other stuff. There's plenty of that in the world. There's a difference between that and really, really diving in. And I will look at anything that I need to. I will address anything I need to. I will be open and honest with like myself, others. I will dive into the depths of things that might scare the living heck out of me, and do it over and over and over again every single day, because this draw for me spiritually is so strong. So for me, I didn't think it was a safe answer at all. I thought it was about like the most opposite from that you could possibly get. But I understood where she was coming from too. It was just an interesting perspective.
But it drove a good conversation too, because to follow back with that answer as not being simplistic but dangerous.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome. So now you own multiple businesses at this point. Now you are an entrepreneur. You're on the swim teams. Are you on a swim team? Like, are you actually doing team events, or are you doing individual events?
Yeah, so this weekend it's all individual events, because for some reason they decided like relays weren't safe with the thing, but we can all stand in really close proximity to one another as long as we're not. And I get it, and they probably planned this out a long time ago, but it's just funny how arbitrary some of it is. But point being, those events are all individual, but I do swim with a local masters team, and it's just right down the road. There's this awesome aquatic center by my house, and it's that's a huge blessing to have it right there, because I can just get up, drive a couple minutes, and I'm there, dude, which really helps when you're getting up at like just before 4 a.m. It helps when you don't have to drive very far to get to the pool.
And the traffic is not bad at that time.
Not bad at all. It's not bad at all. It's funny. One of the biggest problems I have is when certain stoplights, because you get so used to how they function, right? And there's like nobody else on the road, that particularly when it snows or rains, sometimes this one light where I have to turn left, it will just keep cycling through and like not give me the left turn. And so I've gotten really good at noticing when the system is off, and I just go through the red light I stop, I look around a ton. There's nobody on the road, but it's just like, oh goodness, this light has no idea that I'm here right now.
Now, 2 previous guests were cops. So for those police officers, just so you know, his name is Brian Bergford instead. So don't.
That's the one time. Oh, you're gonna say my name right this time?
Oh, my bad.
Nice.
Oh.
That's awesome. Oh, that's perfect timing, man. Nicely done.
Absolutely. Hey, so because I listen to a lot of the stuff that you have out there, and you're a very humorous guy. I like how you bring your humor into a lot of the stuff. But let's wrap into, could you possibly describe your leadership style?
Oh gosh. When you said that, I was thinking it would be interesting to hear that from somebody that I lead. I'd be way more interested in that. But my leadership style, it has definitely evolved over the years, thank God, because I was a pretty I think I had some natural aptitudes for leadership forever, right? Just some gifting. But that being said, it's been a skill set that I've very much built up over time. And I feel like I was a fairly atrocious, awful leader for years. And just like, but that's kind of how, that's some of the things that it takes for you in order to grow. And I would say at this point, I tend to be somebody that really looks at, I love and am endlessly fascinated by people as individuals and all the different intricacies of what makes them who they are, and all the different things that are wrapped into what they're motivated by, what they kind of want to stay away from, their dreams, goals, aspirations, different just systems that they run. And I love that individual aspect because I love kind of tailoring everything around the individuals. So that's one of the biggest things that I would say for me that I really really love. I tend to be with like employees and stuff. I tend to be more. I don't want to say hands off, but I certainly don't like micromanaging, partially because I hate being micromanaged, and also because like if somebody needs micromanaging, like they shouldn't be working for me. So, which that doesn't work so well, if people start making mistakes and you have to come in and manage more closely, you also find out the people who aren't coachable or think they know everything now, right? Because you come back in because they're messing up and you're like, yeah, I am a lot more involved with you because there's clearly some performance issues here and I want to help you be successful. And I think that one of my leadership things is people have to be coachable. And that goes back to like the athlete thing versus like the general public when I was doing personal training and that type of thing. I just really 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 love when people show up and they're coachable, because as soon as they're not coachable, like they're done. There's no more progress, and I know that. And then if it's somebody that you're leading your company or that is leading a team, that becomes then the bottleneck for everybody else beneath them, and I don't have a lot of tolerance for that. So I am pretty hands off. I can get like more in depth with people if I need to. I would also say that I believe in people oftentimes to a fault. I That's just like one of my issues, right? I mean, there's plenty of things that I do wrong in leadership, like so many. So I'm not necessarily going to delve into a lot of that because we don't have nearly enough time today. But I really, really do love and believe in people. And I love mentoring people and coaching them and helping lead them, kind of facilitating themselves, leading themselves to the right answers as opposed to giving answers and directives. I used to give a lot more answers when I was a really insecure leader. And I feel like my ego was ginormous. It felt good to have the answers. And now it feels good to stay out of that business and really be in the business of asking good questions so that other people find answers and that they can get the credit for it.
Yeah, I really like how you said micromanaging without saying micromanaging. You said manage closer. So I like that.
Yes.
It's a better look. It sounds a lot better than micromanagement. Micromanagement, while sometimes there's a need for it, if it's a very specific job or it's a very, like we call it technical orders, TOs, if it's centered around those types of things, you want that. But I like how you said manage closer.
Yeah, because there's like nobody wants to be micromanaged. And yikes, it's just, yeah, it's kind of a yucky word and it's a yucky thing to do. And it's a yucky thing to be experiencing yourself. And it feels very controlling when somebody's doing that. Now, sometimes people need a lot of support, and that's different than micromanaging. Sometimes you have to get in there with them and really, really walk through things together with a fine-tooth comb. And that's different than that being a leadership style. The best leadership style to me is the leadership style that takes into account the style of the people that you are leading and what their needs are. Some people need a lot more closeness and like walking them through things. Other people, like I was always super like with my bosses and stuff. Like, dude, like don't don't come talk to me. Like, I will do a really good job for you. I will kick butt. I will take names. Give me the metrics. Like, what are the things? What is the mission? What are we trying to accomplish? Like, I will do a kick butt job for you. And if something's wrong, like, come talk to me. Otherwise, like, stay out of my cubicle. Like, I don't need you coming over here talking to me, motivating me. Like, I can do that myself. If something's wrong, let me know. But I always found that distasteful when, people were kind of like, hey, this and that. I'm like, dude, I'm producing like the best for you out of anybody. Leave me alone. And I will continue to do that.
Yeah.
As soon as people got too involved, I'm like, dude, I'm out of here. And as much as I don't know if this is super risky to say on this podcast, but as much as I have the haircut for being in the military, and like my wife's whole family is all Air Force, like my dad was in the Navy, like my nephew, one of them's in the Army, the other one's in the Marines. I mean, love the military, appreciate more than I can even begin to express, like what our armed forces and the sacrifice, and really, really understanding how important that is, and what it's done in terms of like building and sustaining and defending the country is incredible to me. I do not do well at taking orders.
Oh, wow.
So I know myself well enough to know that, like, I just, that's why I did really well with bosses that told me what the target was and stayed out of my way, because as soon as I was underneath somebody that was tyranny or an idiot, like, I don't handle that very well, and I would have been in the frickin' brig like real quick. So I was smart enough to not put myself in a position to get court-martialed, which is why I love and admire the military so much, and know myself well enough to know that I'm not made strong enough for that, it appears.
Well, and the good thing is that you've found a way to serve in your own capacity, which is really neat to see.
And I would like to say one caveat: I'm super coachable. However, I'm very specific to being careful about the people that I let speak into my life and give me advice, right? Like, there's some people that talk to me and I'm like, what are you doing? Right? Like, we don't have that relationship. Like, what is happening right now? The people that I ask into my life and that are mentors and guides and teachers for me, I'm incredibly like beneath the mission for that. Like, I'm very attentive, submissive, and like in the good sense, right? I take feedback really well. I don't do a bunch of questioning. I'm not belligerent, but it's because I'm very strategic with the people that I ask into my life, into my personal inner circle. And I think that that's a really big thing for a lot of people out there, no matter what their vocation is, that be careful of the people that are in your inner circle. And then when you invite them in, they better be good enough that you sit at their feet and you listen, not necessarily unquestioningly, but that you make yourself a student and that you're humble enough to listen, even when you don't agree, and just take some of that back and chew on it for a while, because sometimes something needs to digest for it to actually hit home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of those areas where we tend to have a lot of differences is in that spiritual realm, which is kind of what we're wanting to explore through this podcast. And we've done a good job so far. But one of those things, what I really want to hit here is, when we say spiritual resiliency, what does that mean to you?
Spiritual resiliency. Well, it's kind of the sum total, isn't it, of everything, all the work that you put in or haven't put in. Right. So, right. Yeah. With like, resiliency is resiliency. And so it kind of comes down to like, well, what's your training, right? Like in the movie Man on Fire with Denzel Washington, right, where he's the bodyguard for that that young girl, and like down in Mexico, and for that family. But you know, she's swimming, right, and she's learning how to swim and everything like that. And he's putting her through this training regimen. Anyway, the bottom line is, she kind of puts her elbows on the pool deck like this, and she goes, oh, I'm tough, Creasy. I'm tough. And Denzel Washington's character, Creasy, says, no such thing as tough. There's trained and there's untrained. And we often don't, we might understand that with something that's physical training is the embodiment of something that's just easy to see, like training, repetition, consistency. Like, it has predictable results for the most part, right? And so you can really see the benefit of something like physical training on the body, but you have to be trained. You can't just be talented if you actually want vitality and health, and you really, really want to be athletic and strong. You have to be trained. It's not about being tough. It's not about having heart. Like, that's one of the most annoying things I've ever heard in my life, right? Like, all the guys like having heart, like in the movies where the guy gets punched to the mat and like he supposedly wins because he has heart, but that's only because that guy had the training there too. Somebody else that doesn't have the training is going to get knocked out, and it doesn't matter how much heart they have. Another great movie, which is with Robert Duvall. The name of it'll come to me. It's a Western, but they're leaving this town on horseback, and then somebody says like, oh, like, little Rover over there, this dog wants to come along for the journey with them, and you can see that this dog really, really wants to go. And I think it's Robert Duvall's character says to his buddy, looking back at the dog, yeah, he's got the heart but not the legs. So I think that it really, really comes down to, and like the movie Miracle, I don't know why the movies are coming up so much, right? But it's like like Herb Brooks says in that movie, the legs feed the wolf, gentlemen, the legs feed the wolf. And so do we have our spiritual legs under us? What is our discipline? How much do we prioritize it? How much are we contemplating it on a daily basis? How much are we getting real about it and not just taking the belief systems that are thrown down at us that are like, oh, if you just like believe all this, like you're good to go? How much of it is really authentic relationship where we're diving in and wanting to have authentic experiences where we know it at a level that's not just something that's intellectual knowledge, it's in our bones, it's in our spirit, it's in our soul, because we have gone the distance and experienced it. And sometimes you go for a really long time training, whether in athletics or whatever else, whether it's spirituality, where it's a dry season and you're not making any progress and it's really endlessly frustrating. And, that's what separates the men from the boys, though, isn't it? Right? Like, who keeps going? And what the beautiful thing about it is, when you develop resiliency in any of these other areas, whether it be like emotional or physical, whatever it might be, there's a transferable nature to all those things. And so never downplay something in one area of your life. Little changes here or there make a huge difference. And so I just encourage people to have some grace for yourself, not get down on yourself, and any little piece of progress that you make makes a difference. And when you're not making any progress and you're stuck and you're frustrated, yes, there are times to switch things up, and maybe you're looking in the wrong place for a certain answer, because you could look in the wrong place for a specific answer for 10,000 years, and you're never going to find the right answer because you're looking in the wrong place. Sometimes you need to change where you're looking, but a lot of times it's just putting in the training, the repetition, spiritual disciplines, whatever that means for you, and staying true to that, and having an authentic interest in the truth and being like a dog on a bone with that and not letting up. So that was an incredibly long-winded answer that meandered all over the place, but I hope there's something in there that
it
might
was
be helpful.
Absolutely amazing. And the Robert Duvall movie, I believe, was Open Range.
Thank you. You were the man.
Yeah, with Kevin Costner.
Love you, Nathan. Thank you, man.
Hey, so you talked a lot about training, which I love, because if you don't look at something and you look at the physical body and you can see that they are trained for what they're doing. How do we train, or how do we cultivate spiritual resiliency in ourselves or our family, our team?
Cultivating. So there's a couple answers here. First, we always have to cultivate it in ourselves, right? So I'll swing back to that in a minute, because when it comes to cultivating that in our team, in our family, one of the most profound things we can do is to become something that doesn't need explaining. That when people are in our presence, there's like a palpable energy to it that has an effect on the people in our lives, the folks that are around us, the folks that surround us, the people that we lead and mentor. And so you don't ever have to have a spiritual conversation with somebody to help create an environment where they are kind of magically more open to certain things. Right. And then I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is becoming something, not just talking about it. And that opens doors like you wouldn't believe. But we often think of like, well, what can I do? What can I do? What should I be doing? What should I be doing? What should I be doing? And spirituality is a being question. It is not a doing question. There's a doingness to it. There's a drive that it takes to really pursue the spiritual path, but ultimately it's about becoming something that doesn't necessarily need explanation. So I think becoming something is the biggest answer for if you're leading teams and you want to help them cultivate that in themselves. With us as individuals, it's going to look different for everybody, and that's one of the tough things. For I mean, I love it as a coach because especially like I have hardly any like one-on-one clients because I like to go really deep with people and not have my efforts spread really thin. But the people I'm doing one-on-one coaching for, we can get really specific across all these different areas because I understand who they are and what has worked for them in the past, what doesn't work, just the way that they think. So we can tailor it all down to what exactly they need. In a broader sense, for us developing spiritual resiliency, it's all the other stuff we talk about, though, right? First of all, you have to have a drivenness, a desire for it, an openness, a willingness. That's where it all starts, right? There has to be something to shoot for, because to sit here and say like, oh, you should develop spiritual resiliency, if somebody has no interest in spirituality, that falls on deaf ears. Like what's the point? And there might be some people that are in that place and there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's like, well, do I have to be spiritual? It's like, trust me, dude, when you need to be spiritual, you will become spiritual.
Yeah, absolutely.
Life will definitely give you opportunities. And once that doorway is open and there's a willingness and there's a drive toward it, things start to like open up for you. And then I think it's just a matter of keeping it in front of you, just like anything else that we would say is important in a different aspect of our lives. We can't think about it like one day and then we revisit it like 3 months later. And then we think about it again for a week and then we revisit it, because that's not good training. There's not enough consistency there. And that doesn't mean that if you've been kind of fallen off the wagon or whatever, that you should feel bad about that. It has nothing to do with that. It just, when you get to a point where you have that determination to really, really move forward, right behind that. And the more disciplined you are and the more trained you are, the more you start to expose yourself to stressors, to disappointments, to things that require resilience, and you build one little level at a time. And there's no magic answer. It's just putting in the reps and trusting the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can you give us a moment, a time when you had to rely on the spiritual pillar to navigate through something?
Like yesterday. It really does start, to accelerate at a certain point where you're just getting like hit left and right with like lesson after lesson after lesson. A time where I really had to rely on spiritual resilience. So this is coming to mind. I was sitting upstairs and like, I'm not somebody who really has panic attacks. Like I've heard people talk about them, and I'm like, yep, I get it. I know what it is. I'm a psychology nerd, so of course I'm very familiar with this stuff from an academic standpoint. But I remember actually experiencing one and then being very aware. It was interesting in the moment that it was like almost as though I was experiencing it for the sake of really truly understanding for other people, because it wasn't I don't know how to explain it. It just wasn't like a true panic attack. It was something that came on almost as like a spiritual lesson for whatever reason. And it was just one of those things that I had to sink into and know what was going on and be aware of it, and just like breathing through it and allowing it to be there and not like getting in a fight with it, and just processing it and allowing itself to run itself out, and then just kind of like leaning on my faith and like, yep, we'll get through this. I have no idea why this is happening. This is massively unpleasant. Because hindsight's 2020. It's easier to look back at stuff and have some perspective, right? Like I do now. But in the moment, it takes a heck of a lot of faith to just walk through something and not freak out. And I really had to rely on just I guess kind of the spiritual resilience that I had in the tank, and believe and know that I was going to get through it, even though I felt like there was no way.
Yeah. So Man, this has been a very good conversation, because I think there's a lot of the things that you're saying that resonate with a lot of people out there. And I don't think they know where to get the help all the time. And so these conversations that you and I are having are very important to let people know it's okay.
It is okay. And it's interesting how much more we're getting into kind of like, yeah, this stuff is real. Your mind affects everything. And oh gosh, so I wrote this down the other day. I'm so glad I remembered this, dude, because I wrote it down for this podcast in particular. I felt led to share it with you specifically, awesome. your peeps. There's an awesome song, it's Doo-Wop or That Thing by Lauryn Hill. And there's one place where she goes, how you going to win when you ain't right within? How you going to win when you ain't right within? And for me, when you're not right within, you get away with it until you don't, and then things collapse. And that's typically when people go a lot of times for help. It's not a prophylactic. They wait until the crap really hits the fan. And then all of a sudden and I've done this in my own life plenty of times, it is the worst possible way to learn a lesson. It's so painful, right? But for me, I can speak for me, a lot of those times it happened, it was when I'm looking back on it, I'm honest with it, it was sheer pride is what was beneath it all. I wasn't willing to get out ahead of it. And that's why I really, really enjoy what I do now, is because I'm helping people lay a foundation and a psychological framework and building out that architecture so that they have the resilience they need before they need it. So at least they have a buffer. At least they have a cushion, and it's more like kind of that front end, more proactive or holistic, or that type of an approach to not only something like mental health, but just personal performance, and making sure that you're fine-tuned and that you've got what you need and that you're taking care of yourself so that you can perform at a really high level, but not do it to the detriment of beating up your body or beating up your mind or beating up your spirit to eventually like there's a collapse. We're trying to take all that into account. But then some people, right, it does take hitting bottom, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Sometimes that's exactly what people need. They really, really, really need to hit bottom. And, when it happens, great. Then they're reaching out to people. That's more of a damage repair versus damage prevention, but both are important. And so part of it is just knowing where you're at. And I admire what you do so much, because you're talking about these things, you're bringing it up. And what that does for all of us is makes us just look at like checking in with ourselves and like, where do I think I'm at? And then when you finish answering that question, writing down the answers to it, asking yourself, where am I really at? In the quiet of night, when nobody is looking and I don't have to impress anybody and I don't have to uphold this image that I put out there all the time, like, where am I really at? And those kind of questions give you the best answers. They're not the most fun to answer, but they're the bravest questions to ask. And when you're willing to go out and do what you need to do in your individual situation to take things to the next level, or to repair some damage, or to get out ahead of things so that you're able to care for the people around you. And a lot of times self-care needs to be done specifically for that. Like if you won't do it for yourself, make sure you do it, because there's going to be downstream impact from everything all that we all do, especially those of us leading teams of people, right? It's going to have downstream impact. You got to take care of yourself, and not only to affect the people around you, just in terms of you're at the top of your game, but there's going to be a part of them that knows that, either consciously because they've seen it or subconsciously, that recognizes I'm in an environment where it's okay to take care of myself too.
Yeah, absolutely. And being self-aware of what you're capable of. You're not, the one thing that I've never really appreciated is when I'm going through something and they say, yeah, I get you. I know what you're going through. When you know for 100% the fact that they don't know what you've actually been going through, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't like that when somebody tells me that, because that just tells me right there, number one, you're not paying attention to what I'm actually going through. And when somebody, though, now my approach is, hey, listen, I haven't been there, I haven't gone through that, but you know what? I'm here for you in this moment. Let's go through it together.
That's awesome, dude.
But that's
awesome.
A lot of that ties back to what you said at the very beginning, when you were talking about how people need to know they're people. They need to know what they're going through. They need to know those different things. They need to be aware and say it's okay to have feelings. It's okay to their feelings are not bad, right? They allow us to know that you're actually human. Congratulations.
Yep. And it's amazing too, especially for men in particular. There's a number of reasons for it, right? But just like at the most basic, easy to see level, you know, it's not, let's say this, it can be frowned upon at times to speak about things such as feelings. But one of the things that we don't recognize when we're like hiding stuff like that is the power of emotions. The power of emotions, right? There's a study, and I'm going to botch this but you'll get kind of the crux of it. There's a study about that people who have damage to the area of their brain that's like related to it's something related to emotions specifically, right? And it's a specific region of the brain, they can know everything intellectually and on paper about what the right decision is. Like you can present something to them that's super obvious, but they can't make the decision because they don't have that emotional center intact. So talking about this stuff or bringing it up or whatever needs to happen for each of us as individuals, a lot of it, I think, is just recognizing the incredible power that we can unleash and channel down the proper channels and make ourselves so much more effective as leaders, as, husbands, wives, whatever, right? As parents, as siblings, et cetera, as fellow countrymen. There's so much power there that can be unleashed, and unfortunately oftentimes it just kind of like bleeds out into stuff that it doesn't really have a positive effect on, because we are either not talking about the emotions, or we're like, I'll just deal with it. But it's like, dude, like you're sitting on a freaking nuclear reactor that can like generate tremendous amounts of power for a number of different things. And we would think, all of us, that since I live with me every day, I should know how I work the best, right? But we've got that reactor sitting there, and it's very complex, and there's lots of switches and dials, and I don't care who we are, all of us need guidance and support and help, and even different perspectives, right? Like I'm a psych geek. I love the stuff. I love the spiritual side of things. Like this is the world that I play in every single day. And every single day, almost every single day, literally, I'm in contact with people that, as we're in communication, give me a little bit different perspective. And I'm like, yes, thank you for that. We all get stuck in our own worlds, our own filters, and just having people that we can trust, that we know have our back, and that we can have real freaking conversations with, not just entertaining conversations, like real deep conversations about, I'll say, stuff that need to be had in an authentic way. There's that is so powerful in helping us really, like I said, channel all that power, maybe see where we're off base on things. And if you don't have that available to you, part of it is just having an intention about opening yourself to the possibility and just kind of holding that in mind, praying about it, meditating on it, whatever different people do for their spiritual disciplines, etc., and trusting that something bigger than you will bring something right to you at the right time. Just remember, you have to let it go and trust in something bigger than you to bring it to you. Otherwise, you're responsible for doing it, and you're going to screw it up. If you're anything like me, you'll screw it up every time. Trust that it's coming, and that it's going to come in a package very, very, very differently than what you might expect, or how you would choose to make it come together. So it's like, keep your eyes peeled when you ask for that stuff, because it usually comes in a package that is not necessarily how you expect it would look.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so we're all about the professional development and continuing to better ourselves. That should be our number one. One of our number one goals is to make sure that we're the best form of ourselves for others. So in saying that, what are you reading right now, or what would you recommend for the listeners?
Great question. Totally depends on where people are at. I will preface it with this. Read read what is kind of speaking to you intuitively. If you are not in a place where you feel like really dialed in from an intuitive standpoint, maybe read something about intuition. It's a skill. It's not a pure skill, but it's something that the more you listen to it, the more it tends to show up in your life. Kind of like if a friend gives you advice and you're like, oh yeah, I really appreciate that, and you don't take their advice. And you keep asking them for advice and they give you what they think, but you keep doing whatever the heck you want to do anyway. Eventually they like stop telling you, or they just get burned out on it. And our intuition is kind of the same way. Like if we make it our friend and we listen to it, it tends to speak up more, and we're also tuned into it. So I would say whatever is intuitively speaking to you. I can tell you a couple of my this one just came to mind. Actually, I read this a long time ago, but How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan is a really, really interesting book on the importance and the emerging science of psychedelics and treating things like PTSD and end-of-life things for terminal cancer patients. Just a really, really interesting read from somebody who's a journalist and not especially spiritual, but then I think after some of his experiences was much less sure that God didn't exist that he was before he started that endeavor. My personal favorite spiritual book of all time is Eye of the Eye by David Hawkins. It's an amazing, amazing, amazing read. Another one that is really stinking fantastic. I'll give you two. One is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. That's his most well-known book and the most kind of accessible and got the most kind of press and everything. My favorite book of his, for sure, much more so than The Power of Now, even though The Power of Now is awesome. This is just like my personal, how it hit me, is A New Earth. That's also an amazing book. So that'll give people like a few different things to maybe look at. Autobiography of a Yogi is also really, really fascinating. So since we're talking about spirituality, I figured I'd stay on that track.
Well, and we will have these in the description. We'll actually have them as well as your books, because it's important that we be able to share the knowledge that you have provided the world. Do you have any final words? Anything you'd like to sum up here?
I just want to say that I love and appreciate what you're doing. And I also love and appreciate anybody who cares enough right now to be listening through this type of material. That really, really says something, because we can get so much into like, what have I done? What haven't I done? Whatever. And it's like, remember, so much of life is about freaking showing up. How many people don't even show up to job interviews, right? That just got talked to on the phone yesterday and they're more excited than they've ever been in their life and whatever. And they're just not like, what is that? What is going on? So I think, the fact that anybody who's on here, I just love and appreciate, because there's something about us that are like kindred spirits in the fact that you are a warrior, you're here for a reason, you're hearing the information, and you don't have to be in a certain place right now. Once you are on the path and you've set the direction and the compass, like, you're fine. Don't freak out about where you're at right now. Just keep showing up.
Keep showing up. I like it. Folks, today's episode is only possible thanks to my friend and producer, G. Frazier with 369sounddesigns.com. Jeff, you have the absolute hardest job of anyone here, because you make me sound good, or at least you attempt to, week after week. So we are blessed by the entire team here at the Wartime Leadership Podcast. Brian, thank you so much for being here and pouring into us and investing in us. It has been absolutely amazing. Everyone, have a great week. We'll see you next week here on the Wartime Leadership Podcast. Be blessed.